and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant. Well, before I got to join you all here as the host of Normal Show Live, I was a progressive talk radio host on XM Satellite with a show called The Russ Belville Show, and this was during the second term of the Bush administration. And one of the most frustrating issues I had to comment on dealt with embryonic stem cell research. You know, these are those little protocells that are the blank slate from which, bone, muscle, nerve, brain, all the other cells are formed in our body. And they hold amazing promise in the treatment of illness and injuries. You might remember the late Christopher Reeve fighting for stem cell research to help those who are paralyzed by spinal injury like he was. And you may also remember, is another issue that, always got me when I was doing the talk show. You may remember, Al Gore during that era warming the world about the inconvenient truth of global climate change. Now, regardless what you think about it, since the beginning of the industrial era, pollution that we've created has led to a global rise in average temperature. We face a man-made crisis that could threaten our existence on Earth. Now, in each of those cases, the Bush administration opposed moving forward on the research of those issues. The pressure from religious organizations led Bush to stifle all federal research on stem cells. And the pressure of energy industries led Bush to withhold and censor information on global climate change. And a majority of Americans, like myself, couldn't believe we'd be so superstitious and short-sighted as to reject the science that could help heal our bodies and our planet. So, we rejoiced when Barack Obama was elected, and early in his administration, he issued the following proclamation. This was a memo he sent out on White House stationery even, says, quote, "Science and the scientific process must inform and guide decisions of my administration on a wide range of issues, including improvement of public health, protection of the environment, increased efficiency in the use of energy and other resources, mitigation of the threat of climate change, and protection of national security. The public must be able to trust the science and scientific process in forming public policy decisions. Political officials should not suppress or alter scientific or technological findings and conclusions. If scientific and technological information is developed and used by the federal government, it should ordinarily be made available to the public." End quote. And indeed, Mr. Obama's commitment to science has been felt on most scientific issues. He overturned Bush's ban on funding stem cell research. He has strongly addressed the issues of global climate change. However, on one issue of scientific integrity, Mr. Obama has been no different than his predecessor. In fact, when it comes to marijuana policy, Mr. Obama may be worse than Mr. Bush. There are 25 million Americans who will use cannabis this year, 15 million this month, and an estimated 1.5 million Americans using medical marijuana legally under state laws in 16 states. The federal government even delivers over a half pound of marijuana every month to 4 Americans who still remain on a 33-year-old federal medical marijuana program. Nevertheless, as far as the Obama administration is concerned, marijuana has, quote, "no accepted medical value in the United States," end quote. They admit there are only 14 researchers approved by the federal government to study cannabis's effect on humans, and the government to date has never once surveyed or studied the federal medical marijuana patients. It's not as if we don't have plenty of science to show marijuana's medicinal effect. As far back as 1974, the government has known that THC applied to cancer cells in the lab kills them and not the surrounding healthy cells. It's the magic bullet type of cancer treatment that we've been looking for. The government itself has even patented the medicinal effects of cannabinoids. You can look it up, patent number 6630507. Despite all this and more, just this year, Obama's DEA Administrator Michelle Leonhardt, who, it should be noted, is a Bush holdover, denied yet another petition by legitimate researchers to study the medicinal effects of marijuana, saying, quote, "there are no adequate and well-controlled studies proving efficacy," end quote. There are no studies, according to Leonhardt. So then why stop research that would provide those studies? The government's not even coy about the political reasons they use to justify rejecting the science of marijuana. The National Institutes on Drug Abuse told the New York Times that, quote, "Our focus is primarily on the negative consequences of marijuana use. We generally do not fund research focused on the potential beneficial medical effects of marijuana," end quote. So what exactly are those 14 approved researchers trying to learn about marijuana? It's not that science has no good news about marijuana, it's that our government doesn't want you to hear it. This isn't just an issue concerning the narrow medical uses of cannabis. Every government that has ever studied the social ramifications of marijuana prohibition has agreed that the prohibition does more harm to the user and to society than the marijuana does. Every study has recommended decriminalization and regulation, and every president since Richard Nixon, except Jimmy Carter, has ignored those recommendations. Even when real-world results show our policies to be ineffective, Mr. Obama continues to uphold the prohibition status quo. Adults and teens in the Netherlands, where adult use of cannabis is tolerated, have half the use rates of marijuana and other drugs as Americans. Dutch 15-year-olds are 1/3 as likely to have tried marijuana compared to Americans. Portugal, which has decriminalized all drugs since 2001, has seen dramatic declines in use, abuse, overdose, and crime. Yet, when asked this week by a doctoral student whether he'd look into a policy of decriminalization like Portugal, Mr. Obama flat refused to even consider the possibility, instead retreating into platitudes about reducing demand through treatment and prevention. Not much of a reassurance for medical marijuana patients who can't reduce demand, and not much for responsible adult users who don't need treatment and prevention. Since reduce demand is not eliminate demand, it appears Mr. Obama is content to continue to imprison those who demand drugs. Well, drugs without barcodes, that is. Our politics is infected by a terrible strain of reefer madness. Republicans who shout about states' rights, limited government, and individual responsibility seem to have no problem superseding state law, fostering a massive bureaucracy, and intruding on the individual if he smokes a joint. Democrats who shout about government surveillance, racial justice, and environmental protection seem to have no problem spying on people, locking up blacks disproportionately, and rejecting an alternative to trees and oil in order to stop an individual from smoking a joint.
This is Normal Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Then to add insult to injury, we have a president who's a constitutional law professor who reveres scientific inquiry and has personal experience on the issue, who seems to have no problem perverting the Bill of Rights, rejecting science, and locking up or forcing into rehab people just like him who smoked a joint.